In this video, I'll show you how I draw a little girl holding a flower using graphite, charcoal, and PanPastel. I love combining these materials to create soft skin tones, smooth transitions, and beautiful dark contrast. And I'll explain how I use these materials together as I draw. The full real-time lesson, along with my sketch outline, is available inside the membership if you'd like to draw along with me step by step. Now let's get started with the 6B. Because it's pretty dark here, I'm going to go over my sketch lines first before I start shading with the brush, because I don't want to lose that. So here you see that beautiful crease line. Here you see not really a line, but more like a shadow. Let's go over the hairs of the eyebrows. And with this drawing, it's kind of really like draw what you see. Try to draw exactly what you see instead of what you think you see. So you know that you have eyes and then an eyebrow. But look at this, because of perspective, because of the angle that we're looking at her eye, look at how the eyebrow is. So you see here, if you would look at her from the front, you will see a full eyebrow, but we're looking at her from the side. So here is most of the eyebrow, it's all in shadow. And then here you see the end of the eyebrow. Then up here you see highlight, which makes the hairs a bit lighter. So that's how I really look at my reference photo and try to draw exactly what I see. And that's a tip for you, because sometimes I see some that just want to draw more of the eyebrow here to make it more like what you think. I'm also going to go over the darker parts of the lashes. So I like to start with the midtones, and then I usually use an eraser. An eraser is used as a drawing tool as well, not just for correction, to correct anything and erase anything, but I use it as a drawing tool. So if I shade this part here, the midtone, you see up above this crease line is a light highlight. Then you can use the kneaded eraser to gently lighten that part. Sometimes it's better to do it that way instead of trying to shade around it. So if you look at the reference photo, you see that this line is actually an edge, and it's just as dark as the value here on the shadow. So this part, this line, needs to blend in with the shadow. See that? And then here we will add the midtone shading. This is the neutral tint, the neutral gray. And I have 3 soft brushes, and I'm just going to use the middle one to start. And I usually start lighter, because you can always build up the layers instead of needing to go lighter. So here it's lighter. I'm going to shade around that. And like I said, for these smaller highlights, I would use either the kneaded eraser or the stick eraser. So I'm looking at the reference photo and checking where I see the midtones. And then up here is the highlight, so I'm not going to go. What I do is I use the brush, and when I barely have anything on it, I just go over that area. Because you want to create a smooth gradient from the midtones to the highlights. You don't want any hard edges. So if I wouldn't use PanPastel, I would use, if you don't have this, you can just use a graphite pencil, fill it in, use the soft tissue to shade. But because these are bigger drawings, I like to use the powder and create this beautiful soft shading. The nose is quite light. You see that? If I look at this part, this is too dark. So I'm going to actually use the tint, neutral gray tint. And with a smaller brush, I want to be a bit more precise. So you just dip it in, and you don't put it where it's lighter, but you start where it's a bit darker and then blend. So here you see, if you look through the freckles, you see there's a shadow area here. And they're really light. With the rest, you can just blend. I want to lighten this line, because sometimes I add PanPastel and it's difficult to erase. So you also want your sketch lines to be really light in the lighter areas. Here is a shadow, but again, it's not a line, just a gentle shadow. So I'm going to use a smaller brush so I can be more precise. Again, you can also just use a graphite pencil. Just, let's see, the 2B maybe. Yeah, you want it a bit lighter. The 2B. start the shading and use a brush. But if you have the Grace PanPastel, look at how beautifully you can create nice soft blending. So you see how beautiful, nice soft shading I created here. And then here the tip of the nose. It's also really beautiful. So you can just really just paint with this, the PanPastel and the smaller brush. And then if I need to be more precise, I can use the pencil. And if you need softer blending, just take the round soft brush that can smoothen it all out. And sometimes you have some more PanPastel on the brush than you want. Then you can just use the kneaded eraser and lighten that area. You see the tip of the nose is a bit lighter. So you can just lighten that. Dab. So these are the steps. That's the technique that I use. Putting it down with the brush. Oh, and I also have a tissue here. So if you need to go over the lighter area, you want to make sure that your brush is clean. You can do that by wiping it off on the tissue. Okay, so that's how we're just going to slowly build up each layer. Let's use the neutral gray shade first. Fill this in. So you see this line that I have now, the shadows on the left, to the left of that line, to the left. You see that? How you create a beautiful edge now instead of an outline? And we need to go darker, but let's just gradually go darker. So because you're using a flat brush, it's really easy to follow this edge nicely. Here we can go a bit darker, but it's actually a bit bigger, so I'm going to use the soft brush. It's easier to blend with this brush. This is the neutral gray extra dark, because this shadow here is darker. And if you're not sure how dark you need to go, you just wait until you add the background, and then you can compare the values that way. Here. Okay, let's use the charcoal and let's define everything a bit more. So you see this line here? There, this crease. And try not to critique your drawing at this stage. Remember, just keep on going with the layers. Trust the process. It's all going to look better in the end. And let's start defining the lashes. And then we can use the eraser to gently erase in between. And we can also even use the white marker if you don't get it bright enough with the eraser. Let's see if I can darken this a bit. And let's also draw those eyebrow hairs, blending in between the lashes. Okay, I'm going to use the extra charcoal that I have on the stump to just blend this as well. Okay, now let's use the brush, smoothen this all out. I'm also blending up, but keeping that highlight, keeping it lighter here. Okay, so you see that it's defined a bit more. Remember, still don't have to create the details, it's just the values first. And also after blending charcoal, you get it a bit lighter, and then you can layer over it again. And that's how you go in layers. And that's how you blend everything nicely together. Also going to add some shading here. So the brush is better for the larger soft areas, but if you want to define a bit more, you can use the charcoal. And if it's not that dark, then you can use the graphite. Of course, use the blending stump. Here's a shadow, so I'm gently blending above. And here it's also a bit in shadow. And then you have this shadow line. Let's use the brush to clean it first. So I'm just using the PanPastel and the charcoal that I have here and just moving it around. I have, this is the regular neutral gray. Or yeah, just the neutral gray. Yeah, maybe too dark. Yeah. No, I want the tint. Use the kneaded eraser just to pick that up. The tint. Let's use the smaller brush to Smoothing it all out. Here's where the freckles will be. And you see that I shade all of this, but if you lose the highlight again, you will use the kneaded eraser. Sometimes easier to just blend it all in and then use the kneaded eraser. So you might think, oh, but that's like back and forth. Like you just created a highlight and then you blend over it again. But I prefer to do that, like go a bit back and forth and have like these really smooth edges and smooth blending, then leaving the highlight and not having that smooth blending. So yeah, sometimes it is a bit going back and forth. Let's darken here. You see how when you define more of the shadows on the nose, it starts to look round. And we can define some more if we need to. This is first kind of like the rough first stage, like just block in all of the shadows first. Neutral gray shade. Careful that it's not too dark. It is too dark. So don't be afraid to go too dark. Just try something and then see like, oh, oops, okay, let's just line it with the kneaded eraser and blend. That's okay. I think next I want to, so this is the first shading of the nose is okay. Then I want to focus on the freckles and then shade everything, and then we can critique. You know, so I just create like kind of like a rough layer, the values, what I see in the reference photo, and then leave it, move on to another area. But let's darken the eyes with the charcoal, the 8B. You see how this can be darker? So another layer with the charcoal. So I could also use the black PanPastel for this darker area and blend. I just want to kind of like experiment what works better, the charcoal or the PanPastel. For now, they both work. So just you need to just choose one. Okay, so here it's darker, but what I want to do is just darken here, and then I can blend using the blending stump and then pull the charcoal down. That's what I usually do. So the shadow, see that? So I darken where it's the darkest and then use that to blend. Actually, I blended further than that line, but it's actually pretty light here. And now you see kind of like this triangle for the shadow. So blend a bit over it to create a smoother gradient. Okay, let's blend this shadow. So the same here, I pull the charcoal to get a gradient. So now you have that deeper shadow here. This can be a bit darker, but let's use the 14B Pit matte. So this is more precise than the charcoal pencil. So these are great for detail, darker detail. So this is the neutral gray extra dark. Let's use the smaller brush to go even darker. And then here, the beginning of the eyebrow, it's all darker in value. See how the darker you go? See that? How you define? So this shadow stands out too much. We need to darken more of the eye. If you darken just one shadow, it can look strange. And then you compare it and they see, oh, the rest also needs to be a bit darker. That's why that shadow stands out that much. So I know some artists just use charcoal powder, but I really like using these different shades of PanPastel because you can really just choose which value you need to create these different values. So now here I need it darker, so I'm using the extra dark again, adding that here to this shadow. Okay, starting to define everything a bit more. I really like how the more you layer, you really see just your drawing coming to life. Okay, let's use the stick eraser. I want to be a bit more precise here. You also see some texture, so we can also create that with the details. And then here it's just a bit lighter. And let's blend that, but first clean the brush because you want to, you don't want any eraser edges, but you don't want to make it darker. So here it's not that light, so we can just blend over. Let's use the 14B I started using the charcoal, but now I want to be a bit more precise. Try not to press too hard, because these pencils have, like the other graphite, if you press too hard, you can create that shine. It'll make it more difficult to layer over. So if you need it darker, you can just use the charcoal pencil. This is the charcoal HB. Some hairs more clumped together. So again, keep on looking back at the reference photo. And you don't have to draw each single hair the same. Just kind of like follow the direction and draw what you see. Let's create those highlights. And if I look at this part, I can already see that it needs to get darker. But yeah, one step at a time. So charcoal and PanPastel can be erased really easily. So that's the good thing. When you use graphite, sometimes you press a bit harder on the pencils to create darker values. And once you get that graphite shine, you won't be able to erase easily, and you won't be able to layer over that easily. So with graphite, you need to be really careful with that. With the PanPastel and the charcoal, you can just continue to add these beautiful layers, get darker, but still be able to erase really beautifully. See how easily I can erase? Make sure that you have a clean tip so that you're not smudging instead of erasing. Okay, so now we have the highlights. We can always go over a few, a bit more, and then we can carefully go between some of them and darken if you need to. And you see how I blend? You still see the highlight, but it's not that harsh. It's not that obvious. And then here I also want to blend actually, but first let's darken again. So I'm only going to go over where I see that it's darker. Only at the beginning. So you see those lashes? I know they are there, but the tips are really thin, so I want to create them later. Here are some darker ones, so I am creating them now. So she has really beautiful, long, natural lashes. Okay, now I like to blend. The blending stump here, here. Just make it all look a bit softer and natural. So see if I notice a difference with the sponge or the brush. Okay, let's use the smaller brush to be more precise here, because we do need to follow an edge. Use the brush to blend that. You could also use the kneaded eraser, because here I see it's getting where it's lighter. Okay. Then you can also just gently, dab, pick that dust up. Okay, so the charcoal pencil is perfect for going around the edges. Let's also go over the edge of the nose here. You see how that really already creates a beautiful edge. You see how I'm also blending gently here towards the shadow on the nose. But here the tip is getting lighter. See how that really defines the nose. And here I blended a bit too far, then you can just use the eraser and blend again. And also to define some of the petals here a bit more. So for the lighter graphite, I used the 2B or the 4B graphite pencil. And then we can always define the petals a bit more, like with the eraser. You see, kind of like those sharp edges here. Define the edges of the petals of the flower. See how this really makes the flower pop. I'm going to use the 4B charcoal pencil. I'm going to go over the top lip. And let's see, the middle line. This is all dark. And then I think I'm going to shade the rest with the PanPastel. And then once we have the values correct of the face, then we can move on to the details, like the freckles. Finish the lashes. Let's not fill it all in. We can use the blending stump to gradually blend that. So I'm just using the charcoal that's on the stump and then using it to shade the lower lip. And also blending the top lip. We're going to blend this in with the rest. But first, with the HB charcoal, let's go over the hair. And then here you also see some hair over the face, but I first want to, you want to make sure that you have the correct value for the face first. I have the neutral gray here. So let's just see how that goes. You can use a bigger brush or the smaller one. I want to first start with the lighter value so I can also blend here. And then with this brush, that's almost clean, blend the rest. Okay, I don't want it too dark. I think it's already getting too dark, but we can later use the eraser again. See how easily you can just shade a larger area. Normally I create my drawings a bit smaller, but I really like to create these drawings on a larger scale, and then you can really just add more of those details. And then we can blend that in. Let's use this brush, it's easier, with this soft brush to create those soft edges. This middle part is just a bit lighter, so let's keep that lighter. This shadow needs to be a bit darker, so I have the extra dark so that it blends in with the background. There isn't any outline. Let's blend the edges. Yeah, I need to blend that again. Darken this here because I see a bit, if I look through the hair, I see a bit shadow. This is the shade. Okay, once we have the hair and the freckles and everything, we can always come back and then just blend over a few areas if you need to. Let's use the stick eraser. I'm going to erase in between just to create that lighter area on the lips. And with the HB charcoal, let's create that darker, that corner. You see that? Yeah, you make her smile a bit more. And then these crease lines aren't lines, but like these shadows. I'll try to draw them a bit thicker, not these thin lines. Okay, let's use the stump. And that looks a bit harsh, so let's use the brush and then blend. Okay, we can always come back to this area. Okay, this part blend it all. Okay, let's focus on the details. Freckles. How do I create freckles? First of all, look at the nose. See how those freckles are really out of focus, really soft. And here you see them more in detail. I'm going to use a graphite pencil first, because you have some ones that are lighter and then darker. So let's focus on the lighter ones first with the 4B. And that I'm trying to be careful that I don't go over my drawing. Okay, then you're just going to create like all of these dots. And just look at where they are. I'm just gently dabbing to lighten. Here this nose wing is lighter as well. Now let's use the brush, but then clean it. Let's actually use the white. See if that helps. Yeah, we can also use that to blend over the freckles if we need. So you see some really light freckles here on the tips. Really beautiful details. But they're out of focus. See that? So just, we need to blend these. And I'm using really light pressure, just adding some spots. And they're not just dots, so really like just small shapes. Some are round, some are more vertical lines, some are more clumped together. And then looking at the shadow of the nose, more to the right, you see some clumped together. So you see that I'm adding one layer of freckles, but this is not it. You want to layer over this. So sometimes I see some beginners, they add freckles just like adding some random dots. Maybe they darken a few, but they don't blend them in. You want them to be part of the skin, blended in, and not these spots on top of the skin. That's how you will make it look more natural and realistic. And the more time you spend on your drawing, the better. Yeah, just try not to rush. Just take your time. If it's time for a break, take a break, come back. Don't give yourself any deadlines. Just try to enjoy the process. And just, if you're thinking, oh, these freckles will take a long time, oh, I don't feel like doing that, I'm just going to rush. Yeah, you will see it in the end result. So it's up to you if you're going to take your time. And again, you can just take a break and come back. You don't have to finish this all in one go. So try not to rush. Now, let's focus on one darker. Let's use the 6B graphite pencil. And now you can look at the darker ones, still with light pressure. You can go over some of the lighter ones or just leave them lighter. Let's use the white. Blend over this. See how the freckles get nicely blended in with the neutral gray shade. Again, just darken here a bit. We still need to darken here in between the lashes. And blending it down to get this gradual. And then here we also need it darker. So this part looks too dark now, but that's because I don't have the rest darker here. And then those lashes also need to be darker, that they will need to blend over this area. Now we can go a bit darker with the A to B. Here I see some darker ones. So that's how I always create freckles. I haven't drawn many freckles, portraits with freckles yet, actually. Maybe twice. But you want to draw them in layers. Start with the lighter ones and then build up the layers, go over them. To create a realistic drawing, you need layers with everything that you create. With the lashes, you need layers. With the hair, you need layers. The freckles, you need layers. And I always blend after each layer. Actually, that petal, I can see now that it's with the 4B. Don't want it too dark. But you can see this petal, I want to define the line like that. And blend, because it's not really a line, but it's more like shadow here on the top lip. And don't want any edges, so I'm blending that in. Here there are many freckles all together. I just keep on looking back at the reference photo. Where do you see the freckles? Which direction do they go? Where do you see more of them together? Okay, let's blend again. I like how the freckles are looking. Still need to add some darker ones. Maybe lighten a bit. So then we can use the kneaded eraser. So you can blend, darken, lighten if you need to. Is the shadow dark enough here? Let's use the stump. Blend these as well. So you see how I blend after each layer, even with hair. I want it to look natural. And sometimes you do want sharp details, but I do that in the last step. This is the extra dark. Let's add a bit darker shading here. Blend in between those hairs, the eyebrow, because that's where that shadow is. Blend, and then you see that I blended over or at the top where you see those hairs. See that? So you can add those back, that highlight, and then here in between a bit. And let's blend here a bit. Okay. And now the lashes. This is the HB, or actually I used that already. Let's use the 2B. It's just a bit darker and a bit softer. So now here at the base, you want them a bit darker. Stick eraser, just those brighter again. Not all of them are bright, so yeah, the highlight is as bright as the flower. That if you compare that. And then I want to use, this is the 14B of the Pit Graphite Matte. Now I want to create those finer lashes. See, that really helps to create that beautiful detail because the lashes looked a bit chopped off. And she has these beautiful long natural lashes. And let's actually use the 10B Pit Graphite Matte to continue to darken some of the freckles. You can use really light pressure to darken. So I hope it's also going well for you. I really like adding the final details. It really brings your drawing to life even more. So make sure that you, in between, squint your eyes a bit to make sure that you have the values correct everywhere. I'm using light pressure with this pencil, and then here a bit more medium pressure where they are, where it's a bit darker. Okay, let's blend this. Careful where it's lighter. You might want to clean the brush. Okay, let's move on to the hair. Using the charcoal, the HB. Blend the charcoal in. Make the skin just a bit darker between the hair. And now another layer with the charcoal, the HB. And then with really light pressure, it's going to add. And then you also want to blend those in. Actually, with the 14B, I'm going to try this because some are a bit lighter, more to the back. There are some more hairs here. You can create just a few like messy ones. Don't want it all too neat. For the darker hair here, because it's as dark as the background. See that if you compare it? And then here. So this hair is a bit darker than the other hair is a bit more to the back. The more individual hair strands. Let's blend this. See, that really helps. Make it look softer, more to the back. Make the hair look more natural. Blending the freckles again. And then let's darken again. Because after blending, they get a bit lighter. Or are they dark enough? Maybe just a few here. This is the 14B. Like this one is darker. You can also blend with the blending stump. Let's use the 4B again to create a few more subtle, lighter ones. Okay, so now you can step away, take a picture, come back with fresh eyes, squint your eyes, check everything to see if you're satisfied. And remember, it's all about practice. So if this is quite new for you, like these techniques, and you find it a bit challenging, the more often you practice, the better you will get with these techniques. Or if you're not satisfied maybe with some parts of your drawing, try to take that with you and see that as a challenge, that you know now what to do or not to do with your next drawings. So don't give up or don't be too hard on yourself. Every drawing you create, you learn something new. I'm really trying to define the shadows that I have here. To remember the highlights, midtones and shadows are what creates that roundness in your drawing. Let's remove the tape and look at that clean border. The table got a bit dirty, but look at this beautiful clean border. Now that really makes a difference. And now you can really see how the background stands out, how that nice, beautiful, dark contrast looks. And then, once you clean the table a bit more, or you can even put this in or frame your drawing, it can be really beautiful. But the thing here, because we didn't use that much look how when you use graphite and you look at your drawing from a different angle, like in the light. Let me show you. I have one here. Let me show you. For this area, I used, I think, the black colored pencil, or also a bit of the Pit Graphite Matte. But now let me show you. See that shine when I hold it like this. And then I use charcoal for the hair, so you don't see any shine there. But I used graphite for a few parts here. And that's what you get with graphite. But with PanPastel, you don't get that shine. So let me show you that with this one. So, see that? And that's one thing that I think is really beautiful. It really gives that depth to a drawing. I really like how this one turned out. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this video inspired you and helped you learn some new techniques. If you'd like to follow the full drawing process, the real-time lesson and sketch outline are available inside the membership. Feel free to leave a comment if this was helpful or if you'd like to see more portrait tutorials like this. And I'll see you in the next video.